I'm Bill Evans, and I'm the general partner of Rock Health Capital, and you're watching an episode in the Rock Health Summit virtual series. I'm really excited because I'm joined today by Sandra Abravaya and Brian Wallach. They're the co-founders of Synapticure, which is one of Rock Health Capital's newest portfolio companies and one of our most recent investments. Sandra and Brian, it is so incredible. It's awesome to have this chance to talk to you and to have you share your own and Synapticure's story. Thank you so much for taking time to sit down and talk.
First, thank you, Bill, for having us. Do you want to start by sharing, or should I share, and then you can rewrite what I share? Okay, Brian is saying that I should start by sharing about our personal background, and then Brian will be editing away and rewriting our history here. So no, all joking aside, so Brian and I actually we're celebrating our 10-year wedding anniversary shortly, and Brian and I first met in politics on the Obama campaign. We worked in the Obama White House together. Brian is an attorney by training. I'm in communications, and when we worked in the Obama White House, I was an associate communications director and Brian was in White House counsel. So it was basically his job to say no to everything that I proposed. And we had a fast friendship, and then we're dating for several years before getting married. And we've been living in Chicago for some time. We started our family, and at the age of 37, we had just come home from the hospital with our second daughter, and we had a 2-year-old. And on that very day, Brian, going to what he thought at the time was a routine physician visit that led to a neurologist visit, was told that he very likely had ALS or Lou Gehrig's, and that he potentially had only 6 months left to live.
It's really unbelievable what you guys, your story together, and sort of the starting place goes way back before starting a company. It's unusual in so many ways. And I actually want to take a step back even before diving into Synapticure, because there's so much unusual in the best possible way about both of you as individuals, but certainly as company founders. You know, first and foremost, you just talked about your understanding, your lived experience battling neurodegenerative disease is incredible and inspiring. But I personally, I'll say your energy in your ability to make things happen and get things moving is even more incredible, perhaps. So I think I've never met two people like you. You are consummate rule breakers in the best sort, and selfishly the kind of people I just love to be around. So could you tell people what I mean by all of that?
So for me, I did spend a few months ignoring my diagnosis and I focused on my work as a federal prosecutor. And that all changed in November when I saw a doctor for a second opinion, and he said 3 things. Number 1, you do have ALS. Number 2, Sandra, you are stuck with this SOB for a while. And number 3, Brian, you have a background in public speaking and law. What if you put that to work? Changing the ALS fight. So I thought about that for a month. And then I told Sandra that I wanted to start a nonprofit And she said no. But she did give me a path forward. Where I spent the next 7 months flying around the country to learn more about what people were doing in the fight and to figure out where the gaps were. And if we could help fill them. So after that, I made a PowerPoint presentation for my wife. And that is how we started IMALS. Yeah, absolutely. Brian's asking me to share a bit more about how we've broken every rule.
Yeah.
I finally had White House counsel applaud me for breaking every rule. So certainly, I did see through Brian's listening and learning journey in the sector that one of the real areas of need in ALS and in neurodegenerative diseases more broadly was increased federal funding. And so we've both been so impressed and in awe of what oncology has done over the last 20 years, and frankly distressed that neurodegenerative diseases have not mirrored that kind of progress. And so what we're talking about here is a continuum of diseases, everything from ALS to Parkinson's to MS to Alzheimer's and related dementias. All of these diseases are linked scientifically. They have similar, in many regards, care experiences, both from a patient's perspective and from a caregiver's perspective. And so we felt that we, having come from government, having come from community building, had a real opportunity to contribute to changing that story, that federal funding history and future for federal funding. And so we took IMALS, this nonprofit that we co-funded, and we put all of our own energy and leveraged our network from our time in government and advocacy and community organizing, and then created this incredible coalition in the ALS community of people who mobilized. And we have increased over the last 5 years federal funding for ALS research by nearly collectively $1 billion. And that is through a number of different avenues, from DoD funding to NIH funding to funding for ACT for ALS, which is a specific expanded access program that was also a big part of our work over the last several years. And so it turns out that Brian was right, and it made sense to start a nonprofit. And also it turns out that Sandra and I are really good at not accepting no for an answer.
I think you know what arms to twist, and maybe even more than that, how to get what you want out of this system, this complex healthcare and government system. And I have to say personally, when I first met you, and I've told you guys this, but I think others should hear this, because there's sort of a unspoken rule in healthcare investing that you really don't want to take the risk in a business that might not have access to funding or might not have reimbursement, or government policy might change in the future. So you really don't generally invest in businesses that require a change in policy, because it just could never happen. So founders who say, hey, when policy changes, this business would be great, it's not usually the story you want to hear. I've never been approached by two founders who said, by the way, we've gotten 2 acts of Congress passed already. and we don't need any more. We're just here to go solve the problems and like just create massive change for patients who are in the highest and most significant level of need. So I just never heard or seen anything like it before. I can say that with complete no exaggeration. So we should shift gears to Synapticure, because many of the things that you did, and by the way, you didn't mention one other thing that, and I hope everyone who sees this takes the time to go and watch No Ordinary Campaign, a documentary that goes far beyond the story you just told, but tells it in really amazing depth and detail, and is incredibly moving. So I hope everyone takes the time to do that and looks it up on the web right now. But let's shift gears to Synapticure and what you're doing now, because it's just as inspiring and just as important. And the fact of you beginning your journey the way you did, and entering this space from the perspective of high acuity, high need, high cost, high unmet needs and high cost, and really going after difficult problems first is both inspiring and I think really, really savvy too. It has a lot of leverage for change in the healthcare system.
Absolutely. So, after several years of these advocacy efforts, both to your point in increasing federal funding and also, as Brian did, writing a bill from scratch that became law and all that accompanies that, what we realized was that two aspects of the healthcare system when it came to neurodegenerative diseases that advocacy really could not fundamentally alter were, one, the care model or the need for access to much higher quality of care. And the second being a need for high quality data that biopharma and nonprofit research institutions could leverage to vastly accelerate the development of targeted therapies. And so ultimately, Brian and I and a cohort of others felt that the solution to those two problems would be to launch Synapticure, which is currently the only neurodegenerative disease medical care entity that operates in all 50 states, providing physician care, nursing care, genetic testing, genetic counseling, truly that full set of resources that people currently have to travel extensively to find, have to be waiting 8 to 12 months to access. And what we are doing through Synapticure is we're meeting families with Alzheimer's, with Parkinson's, with ALS, with all of these neurodegenerative diseases where they're at, which frankly, as these diseases disable individuals, is at their home. And that's where they need access to high caliber specialists. And as a result of that, we are bringing together a critical data set of genetic data, of biomarker data that is going to vastly accelerate the rate at which those who are developing targeted therapies are able to do so. And I would add in one more thing that we've talked about, Bill, is that for many people living with these diseases, they're not receiving care at all, or they're only receiving care from the PCP. So what we aim to do is to democratize care and make sure that everyone living with these neurodegenerative diseases has access to the type of care I wish I had.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The one of the things that leaped out at me when I met you and we started talking about the business finally, because I couldn't take my mind off of all the other things you've done, was that you're enabling the delivery of the most effective care at the lowest cost site of care. And you're doing that as widely as possible. And you're doing it in a way that takes big elements of cost out of the system. And if we had enough time, I would love to dig into all of the nuts and bolts, and we talk about them a great deal together. But I think it's probably fair, if you would agree, hopefully, that that's really the essence of it. It's what makes this such a powerful, for us, a powerful statement in terms of what we want to be aligned with when we make investments, and I think such a powerful solution for patients everywhere.
Absolutely. And well, Brian and I obviously started in tackling the complexity of ALS care because it's what we knew best. And we also figured if we could solve for the care model in ALS, it would set us up really well to support the related disease areas. We are currently, alongside the Michael J. Fox Foundation, supporting patients with Parkinson's and have since moved into dementia and Alzheimer's. And so we are truly looking to support this entire community of diseases, which will affect 1 in 10 Americans. And this challenge is only going to increase as the disease incidence increases and as the shortage of specialty neurology becomes even more acute. And so we're really scaling the accessibility of these physicians, these specialists, this team of nurses and care coordination and navigation support so that it can reach everyone across the country in a really democratized manner.
So to that point, Brian and Sandra, the opening of your platform, or the strategy for the platform, has been to go in on very difficult, traditionally very difficult to treat, or largely untreated illnesses, starting with ALS. Can you talk a bit about, how that's helped you learn and build the care pathways and the care that you then can extend and deliver on a broader base, and how that works, and why that's beneficial, and maybe on both fronts. There's care delivery, but there's also data that you're building for pharma.
Absolutely. I mean, I'll start with the care element first. So, really important that this model is extremely caregiver and patient centric. And, for most of these neurodegenerative diseases, the lion's share of the care ultimately falls on the caregiver. So, it's really important, to us, for me as a caregiver, every day experiencing the reality of this disease to help inform this iterative, approach to this care model. And ultimately, what has been so successful about the care we deliver is that the navigation support that our care coordination team provides, helping the caregiver primarily get access to all the various types of equipment, navigate the insurance components and coverage components and delivery components and the interoperability of all the devices, to getting the medications prescribed efficiently and also getting those covered by insurance and having real in-depth conversations with your specialists, with your clinicians about the clinical trial landscape and really receiving thoughtful clinical trial decision making support, getting genetic testing and counseling from the moment you get diagnosed so that that can inform your clinical trial decision making support. All of these things obviously were part of our experience with ALS, but they're so pertinent to Alzheimer's and to Parkinson's and to these other related areas of dementia because the caregiver in each of these situations is today, unfortunately, usually having to do this alone and with very minimal support and having to wait, somewhere between 4 to 8 months, depending on the disease type, right, to get these really coveted spots these times with the clinician and never feeling like they get enough time and enough guidance. So I think that's really critical about, the care model, why we started in ALS, one of the most complex of these diseases, but felt that the experience of patients and caregivers was very much aligned with these, other neurodegenerative diseases. Did you want to add anything? Yeah. And then, yeah, Brian's prompting me, Bill, to answer your second question, which is the value of this data. And so, Brian and I have, because we're so intent on being at the cutting edge of the research, the science, the therapy development, so that Brian has a chance to be among the first generation of survivors of this disease. So we have been at the doorstep and in conference rooms with, every biopharma player in this sector. And what we heard time and time again was nobody was holistically collecting the genetic data, the blood-based biomarker data that really allowed oncology to accelerate at the pace that it has, to really, subsegment the population, to, create these targeted sets of therapies. I mean, in ALS, Brian has a genetic variant which is of unknown significance. There was a biopharma company that said, we might actually have a therapy for that, but we have no idea what the market size is. So we can't even justify, to our board to move forward with the therapy. I mean, what a nightmare. I mean, so ultimately, these companies, this industry is starved for good data. And by being this care platform that is truly transforming the patient experience, we have the opportunity to simultaneously transform the story on data, the availability of data, and give that readily and in an iterative fashion to those who are seeking to develop these therapies as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I think it's such a great example because it seems sometimes to me, having even done this a long time, that the idea that data would be useful in the medical system is one with a really long dated promise. Sometime when my kids are old enough, maybe that data will kind of yield something that's material. Whereas I think there are a lot of what I've learned progressively from you and from our work with Synapticure is there are just a lot of low hanging fruit. Sometimes we just don't know what the segmentation on a population of subpopulation that responds well to something might be. And that's sort of born of a simple fact. There is no other national provider of the type of care that Synapticure provides. So there hasn't traditionally in the sort of geography-based medical care system of a delivery system of the past, there's just not been that ability to bring all of those patients under one virtual roof before. So there are some really exciting opportunities that get unlocked relatively quickly. As we break here, I would love to get each of you to offer maybe a couple of words of advice for two different groups. One are for the patients that you serve. You've seen so much now, both in your own personal journey and now with all that you've done with Synapticure. The second group are for entrepreneurs in digital health. You guys have shared just a tremendous amount with me in terms of your spirit and your wisdom. So could you offer a few words to those two different groups? What advice would you guys have to give?
All right, Brian.
And I didn't give you time to prepare this, so it really is.
Oh, don't worry, Bill. Brian is always ready with advice.
That's why I knew this would be a fair question.
So in the past, there was a time, a type of entrepreneur that would start a healthcare startup. But I think that we're showing that you do not have to be in that field forever. What you do is that you have to hire the best people who complement your strengths and weaknesses. And for the patients, I would say we want to be the resource for you that helps you have the best quality of life helps you live longer so that you can see the treatments that will change these diseases from fatal to chronic.
That's fantastic. Thank you guys so much. I'm really excited that others are going to get to know you better, and I'm so grateful that I've gotten to know you. Thanks for the time today.
Thank you. You as well, Brian. Saying thank you. Thank you.